Staying alive. To keep the story interesting, I'll share with you what I did to ensure my survival. When my brutal attack began, I thought to stay alive. As most do, I thought that maybe it was a foreign country behind it. After all, I worked on top secret projects a decade earlier. I wrote the code to track the Soviet nuclear submarine fleet, amongst other government projects. Several times they said they would kill me through a remote-controlled heart attack if I didn't obey them and tell them what they wanted to know. I lie on the ground and said I will die for my country to keep what secrets you want. You can imagine the betrayal I felt when I did some basic research. So I wrote a clever computer virus. It was polymorphic and encrypted so that there were no strings a viral scanner could easily identify, and the code kept mutating. I put it on a server that would release it upon my death. The virus was not malicious. It merely directed every computer it infected to a web page that briefly told the plight of thousands in long-duration, brutal MK-Ultra mind control experimentation using EEG heterodyning. It would remove itself and leave the computer with an inoculant. The server that was to release the virus had to be pinged in a special way by my laptop within a 2-week countdown. It is not illegal to write or study viruses. It is only illegal to release them. But if I were dead, why would I care? This threat might have kept me alive until this book was published. I have since deleted the virus. However, I have asked the publisher to put into my contract that upon my untimely death, incarceration, or disappearance, the copyright of this book is revoked and the work becomes free to distribute to the public. For one who studied economics, they would know the consequences of the price-demand curve for free products. This book is surely an entertaining read, whether you are capable of grasping the depravity of our government and the complexity of the truth, or simply read it as a fictitious Orwellian-style prank. The Smoking Man. In the TV series and movie The X-Files, there was a character that seemed to liaison between the conspirators and the FBI agents Mulder and Scully. It was never revealed why he knew so much, and eventually he dies of lung cancer. The Russians were very open about their research, using psychocorrectional methods to try to help alcoholics and drug addicts. The research was very successful. The U.S. studied just the reverse. They pinpointed the brainwaves of addictions and can amplify those pathways to cause self-destructive behaviors. Most people have heard that there is a high percentage of schizophrenics that smoke. The majority of assassination practice targets that smoke told me that they didn't smoke before the targeting began. In only one case did I find someone who they wanted to stop smoking as a form of control, and they did. Creating alcoholics, smokers, and drug addicts are pull-down menu items of the Satan software. Killing the witnesses with an early death always helps when in 20 years the brutal crimes are revealed and there is no one alive to describe them in detail from a personal account once the mass news media is ready to interview. EDOM and false memory implant techniques. Another CIA program that was revealed to the public many decades ago and is very much wrapped up into the current expansion of directed energy weapons testing on U.S. citizens was called EDOM, Electronic Dissolution of Memories. It is a technique to accelerate memory decay of previously stored memories and to block short-term memory from becoming long-term memory. The theory is to supply many new stimuli to the memory pathways, thereby, according to neural network theory, overload the network through excessive training samples and thereby decay the information contained in the network. Basically, it is overstimulation of the brain. The short-term memory block is a method like hypnosis to entrain the brain at a base frequency that is not normally accustomed to operating at. Memories are stored at this new frequency rate, which with hypnotic suggestion can be segmented and blocked from access under the normal brainwave patterns. This is why hypnosis can recover memories from children who were abused under the MK-Ultra mind control program. This phenomenon is also observed with psychoactive drugs and is called state-dependent memory. Implanting false memories is done by forcing a memory recall through verbal cues or forced recorded EEG patterns and then revising it with new imagery and associations. Once the false memory has been created, it needs to be reinforced through multiple recalls. Practice makes perfect. In my opinion, this technique doesn't work very well in most people. I only encountered a small number who were very severely programmed with false memory implants. Another method of memory erasure uses the grown virtual neurons, and I'll discuss that in more detail in a later chapter. Memories are stored holographically and holistically in the brain's synaptic weights, not as engrams or single-cell instances. If, when the plug is pulled on the biocommunication signal, the virtual neurons that help store memories disappear too, and information formed during the connection will be very significantly degraded. There will be more on this topic in the biocommunications chapter. Use of torture to harvest the best paranoid evil ideas. Quote, I do begin to have bloody thoughts. Shakespeare, The Tempest, Act 4, Scene 1. Another purpose of the extreme torture of people is to examine the angriest thoughts a person can have and what that person can think of doing to the people and government behind it in their greatest moments of despair. It is a way of seeing what others with extreme hatred of the U.S. might come up with. My almost finished book on 101 ways to take over the world in 99 days might have been another reason I was chosen for this kind of mind probing. And finally, it is a way to test whether they have locked up and controlled all the information streams to reach the public. A victim of torture and assassination will quickly realize no one will believe the random acts of long-duration brutality and that there is no one in the government that will help them. I have found other governments to be far more receptive in wanting to learn about the U.S.'s current state-of-the-art mind control weapons that officially don't exist, and the CIA interrogation and brainwashing techniques that are not used on random citizens. Therefore, I could not be divulging any national secrets officially. You can see how dumb this whole thing is. If they are trying to keep secrets from their potential enemies, why is it that they demonstrate all their capabilities on people who then would seek asylum in another country? It is obvious that the only people they are keeping secrets from is the U.S. public. The making of a Manchurian candidate. Very briefly, I'll describe the steps, and there will be another chapter on this. The making of a Manchurian candidate or CIA program assassin involves several steps. Isolation and sensory deprivation. Complete breakdown of their happiness until they reach despair. Removal of personality, ego, and sense of individuality through depatterning and humiliation. Fragmentation of personality through torture. Desensitization of violence through imagery and example. And then reprogramming the fragmented personalities through hypnosis, psychic driving, and Skinnerian techniques to be triggered by keywords or induced electromagnetically. Now, I caution you not to try this at home, but ironically now, all these steps are done in one's home using the various mind control scripts and biocommunication weapons system. The current program isn't all that different from the movie Clockwork Orange, except they try to make the psychopathic killer rather than care one. Before I go on, I'll read a footnote. I recommend reading MKUltra, the CIA's top secret program in human experimentation and behavior modification, a book called Secret Weapons, another CIA Journey into Madness, The Octopus, for further details of the MKUltra program. Reading Human Resonances, Absorption Spectra through Radar. I have respected Carl Sagan from Cosmos, Stephen Hawking, A Brief History of Time, and Green, An Elegant Universe, for their abilities to explain complex physics concepts in an understandable way to the general reader. I will never be able to reach their level of teaching, but I would like to explain one technique of how brainwaves can be read and influenced by electromagnetic energy. As it turns out, there are many ways in which this seemingly science fiction feat can be done. I will explain a few of them based on patents from the early 60s and 70s, then expand on some of those ideas. Let's start with the Moloch patent. He never describes the underlying theory as to why his invention works. He just describes how to build it and what applications it might be useful for. Imagine the brain being a complex mesh of switches. Initially, let us assume that they are all connected. We then have a structure that can be analogized to a wire mesh. When electromagnetic waves of the electrical resonance frequency of the wire mesh strike it, it absorbs the energy and begins to oscillate like an antenna on your car radio. This is how radar works, by looking at what frequencies bounce back, scatter, get absorbed, or pass through an object. So like a swing that was pushed, it will oscillate back and forth in the electromagnetic spectrum rather than the potential energy spectrum. That oscillation eventually dampens and is converted to kinetic thermal energy. If we disconnect one of the wires in our mesh by throwing a relay, the resonance frequency changes abruptly. It would be like changing the length of the swing's ropes, or when an ice skater pulls in their arms while in a twirl to spin faster. So simply by observing the changes of oscillations of a swing set, we would know the length of the ropes holding it. Or simply by measuring the changes in our oscillating wire mesh, we would know how many switches were connected at any time. Now let us unravel the analogy back to brains. The brain resonates at roughly 450 to 800 megahertz in adults, depending on many factors. Basic microwave communication hobbyists have known this for many decades. So if we look at the neuron and what gives rise to the electrical and magnetic fields in the brain, we see that the voltage-sensitive sodium ion gates open and close during the depolarization process. The ion currents act like wired electrical currents, and the gates act as switches turning on and off the currents. So the brain, like our wire mesh example above, will resonate according to the state of the ion gates. The phase, amplitude, and frequency of the changing resonance of the brain gives all the information about the brain's ion gates. The return radar signal tells where, when, and how many of these switches are closed and open. This is true with all objects and electrical appliances. Another way to view the problem of reading brain waves at a distance would be to look at the magnetic properties of electron flow. If you model the brain as a coil with inductance, putting a magnetic field near it will change the resonance of the coil or induce a current in it. Ionic flows create magnetic fields, which would change the brain's inductance properties. It is just two sides of the same coin. There is only one force in the universe with many expressions of it due to dimensional dilation that we observe as electric, magnetic, weak, strong, and gravity. It is not a great scientific mystery how the brain's electrical activity can be read through radar, nor the heart beating through whole body or organ resonance in a similar fashion. Other additional signal processing methods like Doppler radar adds another perspective. Even muscle contractions have similar ionic switches that can be measured. Disinformation agents like Dr. Delgado, Colonel Bearden, and Colonel Alexander would like you to believe their version of science so you can join the ranks of the unenlightened, but don't fall for it. The certain government agencies that like to keep secrets from the cattle they are testing their weapons on will do or say anything to keep these secrets of basic physics. It isn't surprising that a major defense contractor in microwave antenna design rediscovered a mind-reading and influencing radar technique, given that they are experts in antenna resonance designs. Now for the more unintuitive part. It has become common folklore and culture that brainwaves cannot be read by satellites. The people who claim this and other technology secrets have been exiled to the land of paranoids and the mentally ill. While satellites are used for the infrared imaging and visual imaging portions of the integrated global surveillance system, they are not the most probable source and antenna for reading of human biosignatures. The disinformation agents have been so successful with this campaign that the mere mention of the technology to government agencies will have you locked up in a psych ward for 3 days to add insult to injury for those experimented on. Let's look at the mathematics and physics behind this probability, though. Perhaps the uneducated and programmed within the policing function or justice system can understand some basic mathematics and physics and come to another conclusion. Just using back-of-the-envelope calculations, we can show the feasibility of these technologies being done by a constellation of satellites or a large phase array of terrestrial antenna. Fact number 1, SQUID, which stands for Super Quantum Interference Devices, transformers, have a sensitivity of 10 to the minus 15 Teslas or 10 to the minus 32 joules. They can measure the smallest detectable change in a second, or equivalently, the work required to raise a single electron 1 millimeter in the Earth's gravitational field. Fact number 2, there are over 100 satellites available for remote sensing the terrestrial landscape in the sky at any time. Fact number 3, we will use 1,000 miles as the average Earth-orbiting micro-constellation of spy satellites' average altitude. Satellites orbit between 600 miles to 28,000 miles above the Earth. Fact number 4, the brain gives off a few femtoteslas of magnetic flux. The heart gives off 50,000 femtoteslas. A depolarizing neuron at its surface creates 70 millivolts. The brain's electrical activity at the surface of the scalp is in tens of microvolts. Fact number 5, a small dipole antenna, piece of metal, cut to operate at 402 megahertz, like the ones removed from many, quote, alien abductees, radiate 2.5 milliwatts from the head and 1.25 milliwatts if implanted in the chest if that person is irradiated with 1 watt of power. Biotelemetry and neurotelemetry are well-studied fields, but science fiction to the general public. Cell phones deliver 5 watts to the head, and peak pulse power of alien signals, I have been told, deliver 30 watts to the human body. But average power levels are still within SAR-safe thresholds. Now, SAR stands for Specific Absorption Rate of Electromagnetic Energy. First, let's approach it from an implant perspective. Also, we know the exact location of the target and tracers. Since there are so many target tracking methods used in the military systems, this is a reasonable assumption. 2.5 times 10 to the minus 3 watts will weaken by the square of the distance if radiated equally in all directions. So the needed sensitivity by a satellite would be 2.5 times 10 to the minus 3 divided by the square of the distance at 1,000 miles. We convert that to meters, 1.6129 times 10 to the 3 meters per mile, and then multiply that by 100 satellites. That equals 9.61 times 10 to the minus 14 watts, or 9.61 times 10 to the 14th joules per second. So that's within 15 orders of magnitude plausible. Or one could state that in the pentahertz wavelength, 1 times 10 to the minus 15 seconds, enough energy could be detected. That extends all the way into the ultraviolet spectrum. That's an easy feat with just one squid transformer satellite. In fact, just a constellation of large antennas would do the trick, but triangulation precision would be a must. With 100 satellites, you could precisely pinpoint track that person and read the brainwaves or heartbeat with, quote, alien biotelemic implants. But I remind you, the ground-based, mile-long phased arrays bounced off the ionosphere is the most likely source, since superconductivity was not discovered until after the first government neurological torture testing began in the early 1960s. So how can so many people be monitored and tracked by such a system? Well, if the source is correct, 25 million people can be tracked and controlled through the brain-machine interface. If brainwaves don't extend much beyond 2 kilohertz, then a time multiplexing scheme, like what cellular phone transmitters use, would work. 25 million times 2 kilohertz equals 50 gigahertz for the upper bandwidth requirements. Currently published radar capabilities go into the terahertz frequency range, or sub-millimeter wavelength, well within the bandwidth required. In fact, the entirety of the human intelligence of the planet, without compression, operates at 1.34 terahertz. That's calculated by 6.7 billion people times 2 kilohertz. In the last few decades, implants have become less popular with the subhumans and aliens for their experimentation. In the X-Files, Scully removed her alien implant and got cancer shortly afterwards. Was that a threat by the aliens to the implanted human slaves? The shadow government will kill you with plausible denial if you remove the implants. I think that is the undertone. I'm happy to report that I've seen and met with many victims of government torture and mind-controlled experimentation that have removed their implants with only beneficial results. Makes you proud to be in the land of the free, to know that stupidity and corruption still exists at higher levels today than when they were feeding radiation to people and dosing them with LSD randomly. So can bio and neurotelemetry be done without an implanted dipole or microstrip antenna? RFID chips have shrunk to the size of a grain of rice. But are they necessary at all? No, not according to full spectrum radar signature analysis or according to the Mullick patent. Just the changes in the brain resonances due to the ion channeling is easily detectable from a return signal from these radar and other surveillance method sources with many orders of magnitude sensitivity to spare. The math does not lie, no matter how unintuitive it is. You can get a sense of the sensitivity of the current state-of-the-art technology just by knowing that we observe the edge of the universe 9 billion light years away with pictures from the Hubble Space Telescope. And as a footnote, triangulation is done by a technique called beamforming and produces autocorrelograms. And we'll discuss more about that later. You can get hold of infrared imaging done during battles in Iraq on the internet. These images show the thermal heat of bodies causing photon emissions due to thermal instabilities with vibrating molecules. There is no radar energy pulse to light them up. It is not necessary in that part of the spectrum. You can clearly see the person's entire body lit up at great distances due to black body radiation. Now imagine that the body electricity caused the body to heat slightly in proportion to the voltage at the surface of the skin. This isn't true, but the thought experiment will help you understand what the images would look like for the surveillance operators. You would very easily see the person flickering in the infrared spectrum and be able to demodulate the intensity of the flickering into brainwaves, heartbeat, and muscle flexing. Well, this is what is happening in other parts of the spectrum that we don't usually see as an image. That is what can be done by the giant eye reflected in the sky. That is what is meant by full spectrum imaging. It provides an incredibly clear view of all energy emissions from every point on the landscape when energy in every frequency is directed at it. The entire Earth is viewed this way. All life forms can easily be tracked. Using the signatures of all the wavelengths as well as body-brain resonances and heartbeat rhythm, individuals can be tracked anywhere. Everyone has a unique body resonance signature, heartbeat signature, and brainwave print. No RFID chip or dipole antenna is needed anymore to do the biotelemetry. Another point of reference to radar sensitivity can be seen with commercial weather satellite radar, which can detect birds or even insects. It is so frustrating to see such ignorance amongst the psychology community, policing community, and FBI. It is difficult to get people up to speed in science and technology if they don't have an interest and are already biased or programmed with disinformation. Psychic warfare has been going on for 4 decades, mostly practiced on the citizens. Using the psychology community to discredit victims of the practice kills in mind control programming, they have successfully been able to keep the truth of the technology under wraps and a taboo to even mention without the immediate conditioned response that person must be crazy who dares speak of cutting-edge neural telemetry and psychophysics. If all these groups of people live long enough, they will see in 24 years the technology will be suddenly discovered or released by the DoD. Maybe we were wrong about all those people pleading for help, might cross their minds. I wasted my career misdiagnosing all those people, might be another thought. I didn't serve justice or uphold the Constitution. What a waste of life I was, perhaps might be thought by some others.